Welcome everybody to the TFM live Q&A. We are just going to get started here in just a few minutes. Just brought the stream up just that we can let you guys come in. So welcome. We'll get started here in pretty soon.
All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome along to this special TFM live stream. It's not something we've done before, but hopefully something we intend to do relatively regularly going forward, maybe every few months or so, or when something big is coming up. And with this one, asked you guys to send in questions on a Google form. So we have those. We're also just going to start out with a little bit of talk about the past year for those of you who may have not been keeping track of the public statements that we've been making. Um, and then we'll get on to the questions. If you have questions during the live stream, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them at the end, unless they've already been covered in the previous discussions. So here we've got obviously me, Declan. I am the communications director on the TFM task force. We have Gus, who is sort of handling logistics, timelines, all this kind of stuff.
Hey
We have
there.
Andy. Hey, Gus. Andy, the developer of TFM, lead developer.
Yeah, I'm here.
Good, good. And we have obviously also Marshall, who is part of our documentation team. It's also a project that Gus is heading up. But Marshall is one of our documentation team, so we also have him here just to give us some input on that process.
Yeah, hey, as said, I'm part of the documentation team doing the video and the text documentation. And if the videos sound bad, then it's probably my fault because I'm mixing and mastering everything as well.
Okay, great. So we are going to start out just by very briefly going back a year, roughly, to when the TFM task force was formed. It was a little bit more than a year. And I just wanted to ask Andy if you could give a brief explanation of kind of what went down, so that people are aware. Obviously, the transition to payware and the necessity to form the TFM task force.
Yeah, okay. So TFM used to be, for those who might not know, TFM used to be open source. That meant that it was for free. You could download the source code and do anything you wanted with it. Before, when it was open source, it was me and Jason Fair that was working on it, and it was just the two of us. Now, TFM, you fast forward probably about 4 years or so, TFM is going good, and we have so much stuff stacked up on our plate that we can't handle it all because we would have to do everything: PR, requirements gathering, source code building, releases, cover logistics, cover expenses. You get the idea. And it got to the point where, to be honest, we were making promises with the open source version of TFM that we could not fulfill. And from a technical point of view, yes, we could fulfill them. But from a logistical scheduling point of view, we could not, because it ended up being where we had things on our plate that were 10 years out. Somebody requests a feature, we'd put it on the back burner, where we would start to work on it, and yeah, it was half baked. You would have part of a feature in TFM and it wouldn't go any further. Well, now we talk about expenses. So TFM has expenses. Um, and it got to the point where there were things that we wanted to do and things that we needed to do, or things we had to currently cover that started costing money that we could not just fork out of pocket. And so, hence the decision to go payware. Now, to be a short answer here, the payware version of TFM is to your benefit because, one, we have the task force, which has been established as a guiding factor for TFM. If you can imagine, I'll say a nonprofit or a company who has a board of directors. And so the CEO slash president is accountable to that board of directors because their overall concern is the overall direction of that particular entity. And so we felt it necessary to do that because the task force keeps us in check. So if we want to do something and it's too expensive, we bring it up to the task force. They vote on it, we decide on it, and if it's a no-go, hands down, it's a no-go. That type of thing. So that's kind of why the task force was formed initially, and then we decided, well, hey, we have 5 people here that is directing TFM's direction. Let's have roles. And so we have roles. So, I'm the lead developer. Declan is main comms and PR. Gus is logistics and scheduling, plus documentation lead. Marshall is documentation person for video for the most part. Tyler Wood is documentation specialist for the write-ups. Rob, which unfortunately couldn't be here. Hi, Rob.
Yes, hello, Rob. I
Yeah,
forgot to mention Rob in that, yeah, but he's
yeah.
not here today, but he is part of the team.
He's part of the team, and he is the head of the beta program, or which we have renamed to the preview program. So this takes a whole huge load off of us, and we can focus on more important things like writing software. So to your benefit for both of those.
Great, thanks. That's perfect. And we should add the task force is ultimately also accountable to the community, and that's particularly part of my role as well, to try and act as a bridge. That's why we do events like this, so that we can be transparent, but also take feedback and suggestions. And if you have feedback for TFM, you have questions, then always feel free to reach out to the task force or put it in a public group. You can use TFM support system if it's an issue that you're having. But it's very easy to complain, but we would much prefer that you speak with us because most questions will have logical answers. And that's, as I say, one of the reasons we're doing this today, to allow some of the what maybe people perceive as the difficult questions to get answered in a public domain. Right, let's move on to this preview program, which is currently going on for the 777, as many of you will know, because we had a process to form a testing team, which I will get onto. But one of the first questions that I'm going to throw is to Gus, just because it's sort of about timelines, is why did TFM choose to start with the 777 over the 737?
So we decided to do the triple for a couple of reasons, but the first one was being that in the older version of TFM, the original version of TFM, there was no support, or there was very, very minimal support for the triple. And so we knew that the triple had just gotten released for Flight Simulator 2020 very recently. We knew there was a lot of anticipation for people to want to fly it. The 7.3 in the legacy versions of TFM was almost completely supported. So that's number one. And number two, we just wanted to create a lot of drive with the triple just in general. Because of that, a lot of people were anticipating it, and it's a fresh new start, a new TFM. We've done a lot of work with TFM, which we'll likely get to at some point. And one of those things is the triple. So we started with that to increase some of the drive.
Great, thanks. Now, the next question we had is sort of twofold. I'll take one part and I'll probably hand the other part over to Andy. So this question is, why bother having a closed beta process, which I assume is getting at why is it closed and not just an open beta? And why was I not selected? So we can't, I'm going to take the part about, why certain individuals were and weren't selected. It was a very transparent process. So this was not about anything you had done before with TFM or your relationship with individuals on the team. We very much tried to approach this as a purely objective process where we reviewed the applications that were put together by Rob, and then people had several weeks to fill out applications, submitting example bug reports and detailing their flight sim experience, their screen reader usage, all this kind of thing. And then we tried to put together a balanced team. There were several things we had to consider, one of which was we needed a team with people who had slightly different levels of experience, people who might use the airplane differently, i.e., maybe some of them prefer slightly less to use first officer, some of them want to do it more manually, and also maybe some people who use different screen readers, this kind of thing. And we also had to look at the quality of the applications. How were the bug reports laid out? How concise were they? How much detail, relevant detail was provided? How was the spelling and grammar, etc.? So many little things. But we tried to keep this as transparent as possible. And unfortunately, we can't have everyone on every preview team, but there will be multiple previews. We said at the time there's going to be another team for the 737, and future projects as well. We don't want the same people to be on the team every time. So if you didn't get in, please apply again. It's nothing personal. But we had to choose some people over others. Some of it was the quality of applications, but some of it was also, okay, these candidates are very, very similar. So it's very fine margins. We're just going to pick this one and then save this other one. If they apply again, we will have them accepted for the next preview, etc. So that's why on that maybe you didn't get selected, but obviously we can't give out personal details of the meetings that were had because that would just sort of compromise the whole process. Andy, from a development standpoint, would you like to take the other part of the question about why make this a closed beta and have a sort of closed loop system, and maybe also talk about kind of the question that I think we've had several times now, which is, well, there's quite a bit there already. Why not just release it to the wider public? Why have we got this closed beta system going on?
Yeah. Okay. So the reason why it's closed is from previous experience with an open preview. The more people that you have reporting bugs initially, the more overwhelming your development team can get. And also, it's been proven to some degree that the more bugs you get aren't necessarily the best bugs that you get. And so here again, somebody would have to sort through all of those bugs. And since I'm working on the software part, I would have to sort through all of those bugs. That's time, that's money, it's expense. So the smaller the team, the higher quality of bugs that you get. That is the main reason why we had a closed beta. Also, I need to add the extra point here is to help recover some of our expense during development. We also start charging for access to the preview versions of TFM. For those who are accepted into the preview team, it is a discount, significant discount, but nevertheless, we do charge for them. And all of that money goes towards TFM expense, TFM development, and to make it better.
Yeah, and it is 100%, a privilege to be on the preview team, but also it is a testing situation, so there may be things that will go wrong. So it's, the discounted rate kind of reflects both of those things. You are getting access to cutting edge stuff here, but there are potentially certain issues, and that's why when it is released to the wider public, it will be paying the full rate and will be paying customers. There's a certain standard that needs to be maintained. This is not the TFM of old of open source where we could release half-baked stuff and say, okay, guys, go play around with this. There are certain expectations now, for example, that if an aircraft is released through TFM, everything within reason will work. All the stuff that we have access to, again, within reason. There are some things either we don't have full access to, or some things that maybe we have partial access to that we just cannot make work, will be made available to you, and you can decide what to do with them as the pilot. You can use add-ons like First Officer, or you cannot use add-ons like First Officer, but you will have the full aircraft available to you within reason. So that's why it's not just a case of, well, we've got some of it, so let's release it. You'll have a polished product. No one can say it's not going to have any bugs, of course. All software has bugs, but it will also be, to the best of our knowledge, very stable and will have been thoroughly tested. So it's quite a different ball game to the open source. Right, some more practical questions here on the 777. How long will it be until release, and will it work with all variants? I'll do the variants one and then maybe hand it over to Andy for the timeline. So the variants currently, PMDG have released the 300ER and the Freighter. so there's only so much we can say because it's under NDA, but they are all PMDG are using very similar infrastructure for all of their aircraft, as PMDG always do. Same with the 7.3 series variants. So a lot of things are going to work just fine. Now, there are always going to be certain differences. The freighter will have certain elements to the panel section, which are going to have to be slightly different to a passenger variant, but they will be relatively similar in terms of the core infrastructure, so that we don't foresee any major issues there. It's not as though they release a new variant and we have to redo the whole thing. The 200 ER and LR has not been released yet, but I would very much suspect, in terms of my own speculation, it will be a similar situation. So, yeah, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, Andy, and also the timeline section to that question.
Yeah, okay. So as far as the variants are concerned, what I can say, because this is public knowledge, the SDKs, from what I can see, are pretty much identical. As Declan said, there are certain things in the freighter that don't apply to the passenger jet. Same thing the other way around. Certain things like passenger oxygen and all that stuff that apply to the 37 don't apply to the freighter, unless it's, of course, the cabin masks or the flight deck masks. I mean, so everything, to our knowledge, should work with all of the variants. Now, as far as the timeline is concerned, we have it scheduled for initial release right around Flight Sim Expo time. This means the end of June or the beginning of July. It's our estimated projection for an initial release. Currently, when I looked at it earlier today, we are currently about a week behind schedule, a week or two behind schedule, because some of the panels that I was working on have some significant detail that required a little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra research. Extra research. So initial estimated projection end of June, beginning of July, but we will keep you all updated on what the actual release date is when we get closer to that point.
All right, excellent. Yeah, I'm sure we will most certainly keep you all updated and let you know when things are imminent, so you can prepare yourselves. The next question we have moves away from the preview a little bit, and that was on whether will TFM consult with the community after the 777 and the 737 to decide where to go next. I mean, the short answer on that is yes. As I said earlier, our aim is to consult with the community all the time. I would say as a task force, we're all very engaged with the wider community, and I would hope that most people in the community know at least one of us. But we are very much across the various forums, whether it be WhatsApp groups, mailing lists, TFM official channels, streams, whatever. We try and keep across what's going on in the BVI community and the wider flight sim community. So and we also know about kind of major releases in the flight sim community. We're well aware. We keep up to date, certainly at the moment, with PMDG releases. That's really of interest, but with the MSFS community at large. And yes, we will absolutely consult with the BVI community, whether that be surveys, whether that be literally just putting it out there in all the various forums and then trying to collate responses. It may also be that certain things just become obvious, that a great opportunity presents itself, and everyone is sort of in unanimous agreement that, hey, this is an amazing opportunity. We need to do this. You just never know. Right now, I would say that's probably there's some kind of golden opportunity is not there. So, but either way, there will be communication with the community, and we will absolutely decide from that point where TFM needs to go. Which links well into the next question, which I'll throw to Andy probably, and maybe Gus as well for timelines. What about support for different projects other than PMDG? Will TFM support aircraft from Asobo, fly-by-wire, or other developers? So, Andy, in terms of the technical aspects of certainly the ones mentioned, Asobo, fly-by-wire, and maybe if you have any other sort of projects that have been of interest that are no go, or why, because I think a lot of people maybe think that TFM's not explored these ideas. There are projects that have been explored that for various reasons are just a no go, uncooperative developers, whatever the situation. So yeah, this person wants to know about Asobo and fly-by-wire.
Okay, so from a technical perspective, there are things that we need to evaluate to make sure that TFM can fully support these airplanes, or at least, if anything, support them enough that you can fly them with some assistance like first officer, which here again is a dependency, and you would need to make sure that this particular partially supported aircraft would work with first officer in combination with TFM to make it flyable. So from a technical point of view, and I'll keep it simple here, we need to make sure of two major things. One, they have an SDK that we can access that has all of their panels. And two, which is the kicker of them all, we need to make sure that we can retrieve from an SDK somewhere the contents of the FMC, and there's actions in that SDK to manipulate the FMC, including its text on the screen. And two, a lot of aircrafts are now, like PMDG is doing, coming out with separate EFBs or flight bags or tablets. And so these two separate things on top of the SDK have to be made usable by third-party sources, including its text. So for an example, in the case of fly-by-wire, everything is a go. Everything is a green flag to just jump on it and go, except we don't have access to their EFB, which has aircraft settings, environmental settings, flight plan settings like the link to SimBrief, and a whole bunch of other things, ground services, refueling, and all that kind of stuff. And, some people may say, okay, granted that it's got SimBrief included, but can't you just manually type in your flight plan yourself? And the answer is partially yes and partially no, because what these airplanes do is they'll go out to SimBrief, they'll get all the performance information, they'll get all the nav log, i.e. your waypoints and your ETOPS and all this other stuff. And then the FMC will calculate certain performance measurements and performance metrics that it uses during the flight that it could not otherwise get if you just typed in, oh, I'm going from point A to point B, let's go. So in the case of fly-by-wire, we need their EFB to be put in SimBridge. SimBridge is similar to FSUIPC, but it's totally different. It's something that fly-by-wire came up with, and we need that to be put inside of there. When we asked them, because we were in tight communications with them for a while, a couple of years ago, and they told us most definitely we want it in there. But unfortunately, we don't have the time and expense to put it in there ourselves. So if you can do it, or someone else who can do it for us, we would be more than happy to support you. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to do it, and we haven't found anyone else that has the ability to do it either. Now, on to Asobo. Asobo, you have all the support for all of the panels that you need. The problem you come in, say for an example, with the 747 Continental or the 787 Dreamliner from Asobo, we do not have access to their FMC. So you can't just tell the airplane, okay, I'm going from point A to point B. Can you calculate my metrics and performance for me, or let me put it in myself? You can't see your nav log. You can't see anything like that, even though all the panels are there. So that is a problem with those two. Now, for the smaller GA aircraft like Cessnas, Bonanzas, King Airs, and all that kind of stuff, where most of your flight is manual stick flight, yes, TFM can support 100% of those airplanes. When I looked at the SDK for it and did some research and experimentation around, yes, they are fully supported. The question in hand here is, how is TFM going to support them? In the past, TFM would support them by giving you generic controls, i.e. the autopilot control to change its altitude, or any of you who used to use P3D with the freeware airplanes, you know what I'm talking about. But in either case, TFM would normally give you generic controls to manipulate the airplane. And the new version of TFM, in order to support these airplanes that would better help you guys fly them accurately enough, we have to build them one by one. So for an example, the Cessna 172 or the 185, we would have to build those separately. So that is that's the basics of what we support, what we can support and what we can't support, and why.
Okay, great.
From a logistical
Sorry,
standpoint,
go
I'm gonna add really quickly. No worries. One of our goals with TFM is we would like to provide you guys, especially now that we moved on to this newer model that we were talking about earlier, we would like to provide the most comprehensive support that we can out there. We don't want to run into a situation that we have done in the past where we have provided very basic support. We want to try and provide as full feature rich of a support experience as possible. And unfortunately, just summarizing a lot of the things, GA planes in Asobo, yes, we can support. Other things are a little more complicated, although we have explored it. And as far as timelines and things are concerned, I'm not really going to go into too much detail about that, but I will say that our biggest focus is right now is trying to get TFM supported for what used to be in P3D, so the triple and the 7.3. Go ahead, Doug.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's really useful. And you know, from a comms slash kind of lobbying perspective, I think it's useful to say that one of the sort of comments that's often leveled at TFM is, well, you know, if only you spoke to some of these developers, I'm sure they'd be happy to help you. And unfortunately, that's quite a naive view, in my opinion. Because one, it assumes that we haven't, which we have. Various individuals within the task force have emailed various developers or gone on a support forums. Andy's met with fly-by-wire staff at the expo. So it's not as though we're kind of just sat here going, oh, well, you know, it doesn't matter too much. If we don't have access, we don't have access. But you have to remember that developers of large, you know, commercial aircraft, we are a niche community within a niche community. And a lot of them will take quite a realist view, which is that, well, even if I provide all this support for TFM or some such add-on to go and connect with these aircraft, I'm going to get 20, 30, 40 extra purchases. In the grand scheme of things, that doesn't make much of a difference to a PMDG or a Phoenix or whatever. So we're lucky that PMDG provide what they do, and that is obviously the most feature-rich add-on available to us right now. But as I think other members of the community have been finding out relatively recently, it's not as simple as just I'm going to go and fire off an email to Phoenix and tell them, hey, we're here. We want you to develop an SDK and provide support for TFM to link in with the Phoenix. It doesn't work like that. And we can't go around holding developers at gunpoint, threatening them. So, there is a limit to what we can do. And that being said, please keep making noise. Please keep letting developers know we are here. And sometimes we will get lucky and someone may be willing to work with us. I mean, very briefly, I don't want to stay on this too much longer, but could you just outline for us, Andy, why we think that maybe fly-by-wire is a good option because of it being open source, and why that might be helpful to us in comparison to a closed system company who just aren't interested?
Yeah, so the reason why, say, fly-by-wire being open source is a benefit to us, as I was explaining before, with the EFB is a very good example. They don't have the time and the manpower or expense to port this thing over to their sim bridge. So if I can do it, or if I can find someone to do it, or someone in the community knows of someone who can do it, then you can port it over yourself and you can submit it to them and they can review it and they will put it in. That's what they told me. If you find someone or you can do it, however you get it done, just get it done and let us see it and we will put it in. As opposed to, say, a closed source, for an example, PMDG. I was talking to them sometime last week about their SDK, and they gave me an answer that said they can't change it regardless of what happens because they're accountable to people that are accountable to people until you get to the top. And the answer is no. Well, I can't just go in and say, well, okay, I'm going to add this stuff into the SDK myself because it's closed. So that's the main difference between the two. One note here really quick about the fact, because I know some people may have this question, well, if open source is that much of a benefit, why don't you stay open source? Well, we covered that part, but this is the reason why open source projects do succeed like fly-by-wire, because they have a massive team and a massive community that can put things together and get things done. Whereas, say, TFM is 2 people on an open source project that is rapidly and massively growing at exponential rates, and we just fall behind. So I just wanted to put that in there because some people
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Some people may wonder.
Yeah. Some people may be contrarian and say that too. Yeah, I mean, fly-by-wire has a massive team. They have real-world pilots, certainly double, if not triple, figures of contributors. So it's quite an amazing project, but also quite a big scale. Let's go on to documentation then. So if you could just, because again, this is one of the things that gets thrown at TFM. Well, I've downloaded TFM and there's no documentation. Show me how to use it. Well, as an open source product, that was one thing, but now it's going payware, so that is being fixed. But again, it's also a huge task, which Gus is leading. So if you could just outline, Gus, kind of what you envisage, eventually your goals being with this, and then also we have Marshall who can maybe talk us through what he's been up to, or how he envisages the video as being.
So, from a general documentation perspective, my goal for documentation, our goal for documentation with TFM is to be able to provide support on how to use TFM with your aircraft. It is not to learn how to fly the aircraft. How we provide that support will be written documentation in the documentation section of the site, and it will also be with tutorial like videos of how TFM interfaces with a set of aircraft. And so what do I mean by interface? Very quickly, how does the user interact with TFM to manipulate the aircraft's controls? How can we use TFM to create and achieve a certain action? And that's what I mean by documentation. Is I will be assisting in making sure that happens. That there is a clear forward direction from a user perspective. As far as one of the things that we'll cover, basic setup. We'll cover an overview of things to very quickly get you going. And one of the big things that I really, one, have enjoyed doing, and two, would like to, and I'm very excited for, is sort of like a QRH system. Airplanes have a quick reference handbook for different checklist items, or if you run into this scenario or that scenario. I know one of the things right now that I'm looking at doing and finishing is a quick reference commands list, and it'll be a master list of every single documented command in every single section that you can find in TFM. So as far as the videos are concerned, Marshall, what do you basically envision for the video aspect, since you basically are more in charge of that aspect?
Yeah, so for the videos, same kind of goals as what Gus was saying. The aim of the videos is to support the end user in learning how to use TFM rather than how to use TFM to interface with your aircraft, rather than learning how to actually fly your aircraft, because there's already great tutorials online, video tutorials as to PMDG special operations, and there's already great things online that have already got great audio descriptions that we can follow, and then you just need to know how to translate it over to TFM. So, kind of, I want there to be like a almost like checklist, if you will. So you kind of know, once you've placed the order, once you've downloaded your installer for TFM, what do you need to do to get it going, and then support to be able to complete the actions required to be able to do a flight from A to B, and maybe even a final full demo flight at the end of like a 20 to 30 minute flight in full, completely raw, uncut and edited, to show kind of, so you've seen it in various different parts, and now you get to watch the various parts all put together into action in a real world scenario. Again, the goal is not to handhold the end user into learning how to actually fly the aircraft. It is to give the user nudges in the right direction and support where required to be able to use the software to be able to complete the actions that they need to complete in order to complete a flight. And I also agree with what Gus was saying about the QRH, quick reference handbook. Aircraft have it, and studios that I work in have it. I don't remember a studio that I've walked into that doesn't have the Pro Tools quick reference handbook on hand in the event that somebody comes in and they don't know what they're doing. So yeah, similar thing translates.
Okay. Very good. Thanks so much. And uh, very quickly, I know that one of the questions that will probably follow up will be how will we have access to this documentation? Well, the Talking Flight Monitor site will have the documentation once it's completed, and it's you're going to be able to very quickly get to where you need to go. You're going to be very quickly be able to navigate and find exactly what you want to look for without having to read a big giant document that has 600,000 headings. For the videos, we will likely link them in the site as well, and we will also put them here on the YouTube channel. Back to you, Declan.
Yeah, yeah, and just quickly, I mean, as obviously more aircraft get added, more documentation will be completed in the event that things are different. Let's say if something's different from the 777 to the 73, then I'm sure more documentation will be done where required, and for whatever TFM ships with by default the first time it comes out as the paid version of TFM, that's probably going to be the only videos that are available. So, say if it ships with the 777 as an example, and you want to fly the 74 with it, and there's no videos on the 74, well, yeah, more than likely that means it isn't going to work.
We will, of course, actively take steps as new airplanes are introduced to provide documentation as quickly as possible for the planes that are added. When they
Of
are
course.
supported with TFM.
Yeah, of course. That's what that's what I was trying to say. Yeah, to have a documentation line for each or a documentation update for each aircraft, like ready, so that when TFM releases said aircraft support, it should all be good to go.
Right.
Yeah, but that process is going to become more streamlined. I mean, for a while, documentation's kind of been playing catch up with the existing infrastructure. But going forward, I think the hope is the documentation will be moving alongside existing projects rather than playing catch up, which will be great. It's a huge project documentation, and but I think it's kind of emblematic of TFM's entire strategy, and it's really important to emphasize because I know there's been questions before about is TFM going to implement some kind of tutorial system that will guide you through, setting up an airplane, setting up a flight. That's never really what TFM is about. TFM's goal is to provide you as the pilot with tools to access what's there, and to balance the fact that you are a blind pilot, and so there are maybe certain slight differences in the presentation of information that will be needed, but that you will have access to by majority the same tools. It's not there to replace existing documentation. You get a lot of documentation that, as I always say, no one ever wants to read with the PMDG aircraft when you buy it. And there are plenty of other tutorial videos and guides out there on what the systems of aircraft do. So this is not going to be there to tell you when to use level change and when to use VNAV mode and when these kind of things. That's not what it's here for. It's here to tell you how those modes have been implemented into TFM. So, and that's the core kind of philosophy of TFM. Right, we're doing relatively well on time. I did see we have one question, so let's just do that. And then there were a couple of things I wanted to mention with Andy regarding Expo, because I think he has something he wants to add on that. So we had a question in the chat from Abdullah just saying, I'm a beginner using Flight Sim. I found an unlabeled button on the CDU. Essentially asking what is this button and why is it unlabeled? Well, I am assuming you're talking about the final version of TFM release version on the website. And I'm assuming you are talking about the 737, because funnily enough, I have a flight going in the 737 right now, and I can see the unlabeled button. It is the descent page of the VNav. It's descent. That's what it is. Why it's unlabeled? Well, I have no idea. Andy, do you have any idea? I mean, also, guys, this version is no longer supported. I should add, so we can't provide support for the TFM that's just out there, so that you guys can carry on using TFM. We can't support every version of TFM that might be out there because there's so many of the open source versions, different versions that people have downloaded with slight variations. But I don't know. Do you know why it's unlabeled, Andy?
Yeah, so the button itself actually is not unlabeled. It has the text DES on it. And so depending on how screen readers pronounce it, some will say day, some will say des, some won't say anything at all because it thinks it's an abbreviation for something it doesn't know how to pronounce. So you may just get button. But when I looked at it, it says day button. So it might sound, if you have your speech up really fast, it may sound like the button or the button or whatever. But yes, it is actually labeled with D, E, S's, and Sierra, which is the abbreviation for descent.
There you go. So it's your descent page. Hopefully that clears that up. So yeah, not an intentionally mislabeled button. Right, yeah, and I believe you have some stuff to say on Expo, the current Flight Sim Expo for 2025, Andy.
Yes, I do. I have a couple of things. One is TFM is scheduled. We filled out an application to go to Flight Sim Expo this year, which is in Providence, Rhode Island, United States. So if you go to flightsimexpo.com, and this has been released as of yesterday, there is a survey that you can fill out. There's two surveys they have. One is the Navigraph Community Survey. This is not the one we're talking about. The other one is a survey that asks community members to upvote or downvote presenters. And TFM is one of those presenters on the list for people to upvote. So we ask anyone that sees this video, anyone who is tuned in, vote, 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 vote. And you can vote multiple times. They don't care. So
Yeah,
Declan,
and the more votes it gets, the more likely that you guys or
yeah, so
yeah,
like,
one of you guys will be going to Flight Sim Expo. So yeah, if you want to see
yes,
TFM at Flight Sim Expo, do the thing.
yep. So like TFM Task Force, for an example, or our preview team, they could put in, there's 12 of us. They could put in a combined total of 485 votes if they wanted to, so they don't really care. So vote on that on their website. It's flightsimexpo.com, and you want the survey on presenters. Flight Sim Expo is the end of June. I don't remember the exact dates, but I think it's like June 29, 30, and 31. I was trying to think of the other thing that I wanted to add. Yeah, I can't think of it at this minute, so if I think of it, then I'll mention it again.
There you go. Right, well, we don't have any other questions. I don't have anything other than that noted down. Does anyone else have any comments that they really want to add or pointers based on what we've discussed?
I don't have any. I don't have
well,
anything on this end.
I do. I just
Okay.
remembered what I was. I just
Okay, well, here we go.
remembered what
Yeah.
I was gonna say. For those people who want to know, because I've been asked, I'm sure task force members have been asked this too. Why have you been hiding behind a wall, and why have you went into absolute non-existence for the past year? And why has it taken a year to get to this point? So the answer is, why did we go behind a brick wall? Because we had to reevaluate. And of course, we don't want to make promises to people that we can't make and fulfill on the time schedule that we need to make and fulfill them in. So there was nothing to promise. So, we had to figure things out for ourselves. The second reason why we went into hiding for a year. So we took TFM, scrapped it, and started over from scratch. And so the TFM that you get when the 77 releases has been completely rebuilt from the ground up, because there are so many bugs in the old TFM that it wasn't even worth going through them and trying to figure out how to fix them or rebuild them. So it was just easier to take a year, get ourselves together, rebuild the platform, add the 77, get that done. There's other things. The reason why I can't cover is an NDA, why it took a year. But and yeah, so that's why we had went into hiding for a year.
Yeah, but that's also why we haven't discussed the 777, specifically, the kind of outline of what's going to be in TFM, or the layout of the various segments of TFM, because it's under NDA and subject to change. And from a comms perspective, TFM has a very simple strategy, which is that when things are concrete, when we are sure of something and we have a plan, we will announce it. And that's what we have been doing. I'm not sure where this idea that we went behind a brick wall came from. I think we've always been relatively transparent. Certainly, for the last 6 months since the start of the beta process and a bit before, we put out statements on the WhatsApp group. We put out statements through TFM social media. Those statements go on mailing lists. Those statements go on the blog. And they have been letting you know that progress is being made. The problem with TFM's communication when it was open source was that there would be a lot of statements made, a lot of ideas tossed around that were never acted upon. Things were said across a wide variety of forums, including various people's streams, various WhatsApp groups. Things were brought up and then tossed aside a day later for the next best thing. That is not a sustainable communications or, frankly, business model. And that's not what TFM is here for. So I'm not going to be, as the comms director, going into a WhatsApp group every day and saying, "Hey guys, here's TFM's schedule for today." However, when we have things in stone, or when we have something decided, or indeed when we're engaging with you as a community, like we're doing here, and like we do on WhatsApp groups, on other issues, not necessarily TFM, but other flight simulator related issues, we pick things up from that, and then when we have a plan, we will announce. As simple as that, really. And that way, statements don't get confusing. So um, that's kind of a more professionalized model than just tossing things around on streams and things like that over the internet. Right, let me check the chat. I don't think we have any other
It
questions.
doesn't look like it, no.
Excellent. So are we all good? Do we have anything else?
We are good here. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of last things to squeeze in here. So one thing, couple of things that I can say about preview that are not covered under the NDA is the reason why it is taking so long to put the 77 in is because we are paying so much attention to detail. I mean, detail, that the old TFM did not. it just kind of slaps some things on there, and there you go. If they were missing, well, okay, we might get to it later. This is attention to detail as much as physically possible, research, making sure things mean what they're supposed to mean, making sure they're labeled the way they're supposed to be labeled, making sure things are understandable and easy to use. So yeah, and that takes time. And the other thing I wanted to say that is not covered under NDA is when the 77 releases, those who are intending to fly with it at this point will have an absolute wonderful, beautiful experience.
Yeah, for sure. With TFM on the airplane, the 777 is a really nice aircraft, and it's going to be updated further in due course by PMDG. But we really believe that you'll enjoy this new version of TFM and that it's going to streamline your flights and make things a lot easier. So it's about all we can say from our experience of using it. And it's not always been an easy road, for sure. We've had times where things haven't been working right, and that's certainly not streamlined. But that's what being part of the task force is, and then subsequently preview. Um, Everything won't be perfect, so that when it releases, it will be about as close to perfect as we can get it at that point in time. So, um, I think that brings us to a close. Right, guys, we got anything else?
I think that's it.
Yeah,
We're
I
good. I
mean,
concur with everything said.
good from my side. If you can still hear me, okay. But yeah, good from my
Yeah.
side. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
All right.
one
Go ahead.
last announcement is we have a support portal ticketing system.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
And at some point during the 77 preview, possibly closer towards the end, we're going to open it and we're going to do away with this antiquated, junky support system we currently have on the website. And as a basic point, you'll have to create a username, a password, then you can fill out tickets, similar to like what you would do with PMGG ticketing system, except for the fact that you will not have to fill out a CAPTCHA. So that's a good thing. And so what will basically happen when it opens, that will be the mainline form for official tech support with TFM. When you fill out a ticket, then it gets sent to all of the people, and whoever decides to reply to it first, then they will be assigned to that ticket. So I just figured I wanted to throw that out there.
Excellent, great. And yeah, so we will try and do another one of these in a few months. In the meantime, as I always said, if you have questions, please put them in one of the forums that the task force members are on, mailing list, WhatsApp group, or you can chat to one of us privately or whatever is easier for you, really. Nothing frustrates me more than seeing someone complaining about something or why are they doing it this way. In the background, and you kind of go, well, if you just came and asked, there is an answer, and you can agree or disagree with the answer, and maybe you'll disagree, and we'll say, oh, actually, that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Why are we doing it that way? Let's change it. But if you just sit there in the background complaining to your buddy about how TFM is such a terrible program, blah blah blah, well, that doesn't help us improve at all. So please ask any questions, and we're open to constructive criticism as well, and we will be happy to engage with ideas. So I think we've just about done it in an hour, so excellent. This stream will archive as per usual on the channel, so you'll be able to watch it back if you missed any of it. And yeah, from my side, that's a wrap. So thanks for coming along to some of the team members on here.
Thanks for everybody for coming out and for all the viewers. And happy flying.
Yeah, thanks for
And
having me on. I got kind of called in at the last minute, but thanks for having me on. Thanks for considering me.
Take care, guys, and be safe.
yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.